Welcome to the Anti-Architect Podcast. I am your host, Christian Giordano. As president and owner of the architecture and design firm Mancini Duffy, I am driven by a quest for learning and radically changing the architecture industry through tech-first innovation. With this podcast, I am hoping to improve the industry that I am so passionate about by taking a critical look at how architects work with their clients and, in turn, how our clients view us. It is my goal to showcase all of these experiences, good and bad. Was it the architect or the client or somewhere in between? I aim to bring my audience new voices from around our industry, interesting people with diverse backgrounds. Through shared experiences, stories, and projects, my hope is that we can improve our profession. Hello, Anti-Architect Podcast listeners. I'm excited to have Lance Amato, IIDA, lead AP, and partner at the Canoa Supply Company, as my guest here on the Anti-Architect Podcast. Lance is a graduate of the University of Miami School of Architecture, my alma mater as well, although Lance is a bit younger than me. Lance is a registered architect and a known and valued leader in the New York City interior design community, as he is the past president of the New York International Interior Design Association, IIDA. He started as an intern with Conan Architects in 2004, worked at Stonehill Taylor and FX Fowl now, until he ultimately returned to Conan Architects, which eventually became Vocon in New York City, where Lance spent the bulk of his career until his new venture. At Vocon, Lance was a principal and managed a team of 60 architects and designers across multiple offices. During that time, he worked with major corporate clients such as Hines, RXR, Compass, and WeWork. The WeWork experience, as you will hear, is key to Lance's next venture, where he is a partner at the Canoa Supply Company. We'll get into that a bit. Lance and I have a very similar passion when it comes to construction technology and how architects deliver projects. We basically think it's awful and needs a major kick in the ass. Full disclosure, Lance's wife, Jessica Amato, is a partner and the design principal here at Mancini Duffy. Lance, thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Thank you for the introduction.
It's an honor to have you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Hopefully I didn't screw that introduction up too much.
You did an amazing job with the exception, well, I may be younger than you. You look younger than me. So, that's a good thing for you.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
No,
you grow a great beard. So
it's a lot to cafe. It ages you really, really fast.
I couldn't get more than a week in the beginning of the pandemic, and I had to get rid of the beard. So listen, our audience would love to get to know you better. Kind of tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Long Island, but was actually born in Queens. Had a traditional suburban childhood. And as many architects, as you well know, got stuck in the world of Legos, which eventually grew and grew and grew. Built things like crazy, got into drawing, and I knew I wanted to be an architect since I was 7 years old. Okay. So, my experience was really interesting because when my friends were, let's say taking jobs at, doing stock and warehousing or fast food, I was interning in the city at 13 years old, 14 years old, Atchison Doyle, a few other firms like that. And I would come in there, take the train, get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, do a full day's work, and then come back. And I wouldn't say I was doing, architect-y things at that point. And now we're dating ourselves. I was blueprinting, like literally blueprinting drawings in the basement of unventilated rooms. But it was a great experience.
Smell.
Oh, yeah. The ammonia smell. And, I lost some brain cells. In addition to the other ones I've lost over the years. But it was a really great experience. It prepped me for being an architect, knowing the world of interiors, specifically in New York City, and really, really knowing what you want to do. It was great.
Wow. So at 13 years old, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, lifeguarding jobs or anything like that, just straight into architecture.
Yeah. I sold watches one year, but
okay. That's great.
But every single year.
That's great. So one of the things I like to ask of guests that have a design background, and you're obviously known for that in New York City, is can you describe your childhood home? in detail?
I can. I can. So it's the traditional Sears and Roebuck house. If anyone is familiar with Levittown in Long Island, East Meadow, which is where I grew up, is an extension of Levittown, which basically was consistent homes built off the same floor plan over and over and over and over again. So that was my house. It was basically a 2-story gable house. Couldn't be more than 1,200 square feet, but it looked like every other house within an 8-block radius.
Right.
And it's pretty amazing. I drive through that neighborhood sometimes today, and I go, "Oh my God, that's crazy."
Your parents still live there or anything, or is that all?
No, they retired down to Aventura.
Oh, nice. Good for them.
Yeah, good for them.
Oh, that's great. So you and I both went to architecture school at the University of Miami.
Yep.
Can you describe a bit about that education there?
It was an interesting education when I was going to school there. And I think we didn't overlap, but we had a 2-year gap.
Yeah.
The biggest thing at the University of Miami was new urbanism, reducing urban sprawl, and really orienting the reconstruction of the 15-minute walk, which actually is pretty interesting these days through conversations, the emergence of hub and spoke and what it was and what it created us with the suburban distributed model. That conversation of the 15-minute walk to work is starting to really resurface.
Yeah.
And the way and the approach, you don't have to reconstruct an entire town, which was the methodology and model back then in Florida, to have that 15-minute experience. Now there's a perception to reestablish Main Street in every single suburban town to create these kind of ancillary amenities and offerings for new business models and retail offerings. So people can commute to the city or just work within 15 minutes of where they live. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I didn't really appreciate, I think, that until more recently as well at the University of Miami, because I remember thinking that, number one, it was a very traditional architecture school in that sense, especially when I started, it was all hand drawing. Like the internet was just starting, right? Yeah. There was very little, but eventually it got into computers, and I had a wonderful professor, Branko Kavorlik, who's now the dean at NJIT, who was actually the computer lab teacher. And so he started to introduce the computers and things like that. But the whole idea of new urbanism, it's something that now I think I appreciate a lot more. Even in the town I live, we sought out a town where you could actually walk to things, as bizarre as that may seem. And back then I rejected it as it was all going to be like Celebration, Florida, right? Which was where they filmed that movie.
Truman Show.
Truman Show, right. Yeah. It was sort of this fake town. Everything was a little fake to me. But there's aspects of it that are actually, you can really take with you into, and I agree, especially post-pandemic, I can see that being something that we look back to, which is pretty interesting. So take us through your work history from sort of Conant to Vocon. Peter Conant, what did you learn from him? How would you describe him? I knew him a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, I met Peter when I was 19 years old. I interned there for 2 years. Conant Architects at that point was 6 or 8 people. And it was a really fun experience. In a small firm, you learn a lot. And I had my hand in literally everything. And probably got thrust upon responsibilities that I probably wasn't prepared for. But I took every single opportunity as encouragement to learn more. Peter himself, people usually say he is one of the more reserved and patient, but nicest humans you can actually ever work with. And that actually is very true. Yeah.
I've been closely connected with Peter for 25 years. And I still call him every so often. He is basically I'd say my mentor and coach throughout my career. Wow. And the most amazing thing about Conant Architects and Peter is that there was a level of, I would say, perfection and also astute dialogue he had with C-suite people and clients in conversation that got those clients really, really excited about the opportunity of design. And I really leaned in and listened to what he was saying and kind of blended my own flair to the way I pitch to people these days. So I should keep going, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So after that, as most young people do, they go, oh yeah, I'm bored with what I'm doing. I want to go do something else. So I did. So I went to Stonehill and Taylor. Stonehill and Taylor, 30-person firm at that time. It has since grown substantially. They did hospitality and healthcare. And at that point is where I started to delve into building code, which is actually one of my core responsibilities today. The first 3 months, I read cover to cover the 1968 building code as it applies to like healthcare principles and egress and fire separations and a whole bunch of stuff.
And you retained it all?
And I retained it all. And I wasn't bored, which is the weirdest thing. Like I was like, I actually fell in love with it.
All right. That is a little weird, but
it gets weirder. It gets super weird once you hear what I do now. But I really loved reading code. And, you know, when you're 24 years old and you can basically, you know, visually understand whether travel distances are going to work just basically off an eye check, it's kind of an interesting skill set. But the one thing I did learn was healthcare was definitely not the avenue I wanted to go at that time. It just was, I wanted more experience. I wanted to actually, you know, practice base building architecture. And so I was there a short stint and I jumped over to FXFAL, which is now called FX Collaborative.
All right.
And it was actually really great. FXFAL at that time is 2006. Was one of the primary leaders in the USGBC and the LEED initiatives. Mm-hmm. Bruce Fowle, amazing guy. He basically very politely encouraged through basically embarrassment that everyone in his firm needed to be licensed LEED AP. And how he did that was he posted every professional's photo on a huge board. And once you got a license, you would you basically get like a star or a color. You'd be like hashed in. And so the goal was to get every single person in the entire company licensed, certified as a LEED AP. It was so cool, and so it was this huge drive. I did it. I retained it. Really loved it. And in general, like FXFAL at that time was a super great experience. We were pushing the understanding of sustainability, LEED practice. Even other initiatives that, you know, were relatively unheard at that point. Bird Safe Glass was something that they definitely pushed.
Which is now code.
It's code. That's right. Bruce Fowle's wife was one of the primary leaders in basically pushing that forward. And I would say the best experience I ever had, and the thing I learned and I knew I wanted to be a technical architect, was a project that I worked on at that company. And that was Covington and Burling at the new New York Times building. Okay. Which was getting built at that time. So FXFAL did the AOR work of that and also got awarded like the upper half of the building for various interior tenants. And I got the ability to do work on that. And it was crazy. It was a great experience, highly technical. At some points, I was basically doing all the construction drawings for 130,000 square foot space by myself. The one thing I didn't like about that project was I had to ride the exterior elevator. Oh, yeah. Which I'm deathly afraid of heights.
The hoist? Yeah.
And I would basically cling to my life on the side of the elevator, like putting my fingers in the grates. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to fall if this thing goes off. But I was scared to death of that. But it was super great. I actually locked myself out one time on the hoistway in the middle of the winter. And it took like 2 hours to get someone to come get me. That's horrible. But it was amazing. I'm rambling. So basically, after that, after coming to Burling, after the New York Times building was complete or mostly complete, they were sticking the antenna on the top. I went back to Conant, had a great conversation with Peter, and was there in some facet for a majority of my career. So Conant was 8 people, and it stayed that way, primarily for about 6 years. So it was 8 people, 12 people. We were doing mostly interiors work, financial services, that type of structure, lots of one-offs. I'm saying that because it'll be more relative later on. super great, knew how to detail, started to get an understanding of what it was to build relationships. And I'd say, how to say politely, but monetize those things into projects is probably the best way to say it. I mean, there's no other way to say it.
No, it's part of the game.
It's part of the game, right? Yeah. And I started getting some small gigs here and there with showrooms and some small interior spaces. And it was 2012. Peter and I went to dinner, and he was super transparent. He goes, I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave the office doors open. But he basically wanted to leave within a couple of years.
And he was young.
He was young. He looks younger still than both of us, which is crazy.
He does look really young.
Yeah.
But still young to retire sell his firm essentially.
He did. I'm going to get this wrong. I know it. But I think he started his own company when he was 42.
Okay.
And he sold it when he was 60.
Right.
Ish.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's the right timeline. But yeah, it was amazing. That's something you aspire to. That was basically a quick job. Anyway, so we had that conversation, and he said, I want to leave my doors open and leave the legacy going. And so we had a conversation. We said, well, why don't we entertain merging with another company? So we actually entertained a couple. There was more than one.
So you were part of this whole thing.
I was.
That's great.
Yeah. It was really interesting. One day I was scouring a couple of sites, and a friend of mine joined a company called Vocon in Cleveland. I was like, who is this company, Vocon? Like, what do they do? And on the website, a lot of those things were encouraging, I'd say, company morale, boosting culture, things of that nature. Had a little bit of fun flair to it when it blended design. And with Peter's permission, basically called Vocon and said, are you interested in acquiring a New York City company? And they did.
That's
so
great.
2013, Vocon acquired Conan Architects. And it was kind of a natural growth and projection, propelled from senior associate to a director of a studio. Grew that studio. And this is probably a good segue, but around 2014 is when I bumped into a small company of 12 offices named WeWork. And it's a whole nother story.
Right.
Yeah.
So you end up doing a lot of, back to Conan, just a couple other quick questions I had. So you merged. Mm-hmm. So does that mean that essentially Conan goes away and they hire you all as employees of Vocon? There's stock traded, that kind of thing?
Yeah, technically we all got rehired.
Okay. And did you have a hand in the financial transactions of that? Were you aware of kind of how it all worked?
Yeah, it was really interesting.
That's great. So that obviously comes back in later as you kind of now are on your own, essentially.
Right.
So what from that merger went well and what didn't?
Nothing went bad.
That's great.
It actually went so fast. It was 8 weeks from start to finish. It was so quick. It really felt like it was the right fit. And it was a really wonderful experience.
So what's funny is when I had heard that, you were now Vocon, I just assumed because at one point you were with Peter Conan, it was Conan Architects. And I thought, oh my God, Lance quit. He's now at Vocon.
Oh, yeah.
It did happen so fast.
Yeah.
But to your guys' credit, I mean, you grew that office. And I know that you also had some involvement on the West Coast. You brought in a lot of work. We would go up against you all the time.
We were, yeah.
Yeah. Like I would see you guys walking out. We were walking in those awkward kind of, I love those though.
I love the high five
see
hug.
people.
Yeah, it's like,
those are always fun. But I mean, again, to your credit, you became known as really just one of the premier interior guys in all of New York City. Why do you think your career took on the interior side more so than the base building side?
I've always enjoyed interiors, maybe because I'm impatient, but the aspect of creating a space and doing so repetitively and at a rather quick pace, 6-9 months to build things out, was always really intriguing. And that was one of the reasons why I kind of shifted gears from FXFAL is maybe I just don't have the patience to spend time in a building 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, one of our big projects here, we're in year 6. And it's got 4 more years to go. So, I mean, an entire decade goes by before you see the thing done. So while at Vocon, one of your main accounts is WeWork. So tell us a little bit about that. How did that happen? And
have you heard of WeWork before? Have you heard of them before?
I have heard of WeWork.
Okay, good.
And not all bad.
WeWork redefined my career. It really did. I never worked at WeWork, but it was the client that kind of shifted me and my mindset as to where we went with Vocon and also what I'm doing today. So WeWork at that time, there's a lot of opinions about them today. At that time, they were a bunch of young upstarts that had a vision to create something called co-working, which honestly, people say it existed, but it really didn't exist.
Yeah, there was Regis. There was a couple like crappy ground floor, places where you could rent a room for a day. Right.
They weren't the first doing co-working, but they certainly had the flair to grow in such a way. And so the first few years of WeWork's existence, they were just taking spaces and flipping them. And it just was the right time and the right people. In 2014, very funny story, but I was calling this one guy at WeWork to get an interview and a meeting with them. Our firm was 12 people. It was Vocon at that time. We had one person that knew Revit. I shouldn't be saying this, but whatever. It's 8 years later. One person that knew Revit, and I've always followed WeWork at that point. I really love what they were doing. I finally get this meeting. And sure enough, the night before, I get 102 fever, and I am just like sacked out. The meeting was at 4:00 on a Friday. I was bedridden Thursday night. And so Jess, she goes, you're not going to that interview. And I go, I'm going to that interview. And so I just slammed Tylenol, 3 cups of coffee, like a tub of water. I don't know what I was drinking in that point, but I just suck it up. I go to the city. I tried not to look like I was sweating and pale. And I meet these 2 guys, and they go, hey, guess what? We just closed our Series C at that time, or Series B, and we're going to go national. And I hear that you guys have the ability to service national. I go, yeah, definitely. And he goes, and we're fully in Revit. You know Revit, right? I'm like, yep, definitely know Revit. And so I always tell this story. I used to tell a story at the crew at Vocon. I texted the person that knew Revit. And I say, you weren't lying about being an expert at Revit, right? She goes, no. I'm like, all right, get ready. So it was an amazing experience. We basically onboarded an entire firm on Revit within 3 to 4 months.
Wow.
And we helped WeWork expand nationally. I was on a plane every single week for 26 weeks straight. I was Denver, Chicago, South Florida, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Texas, just bouncing around. And what we were doing at that point was trying to prove to, frankly, the nation, but really specifically to landlords and building officials, the premise of what co-working was and how it fell within the niche of the current building code. Because, most importantly, co-working is an extremely dense space.
Right.
The density factors to me co-working was 55 usable square foot a person. Mm-hmm. And the building code, you know that base building code accommodates for 100, sometimes 150.
Yeah.
So we'd have to go in there and show these extremely dense floor plates to these building officials, present our case, say, this is how we want to do it. This is where it falls in code. And we built like crazy. And at the end of that great experience, not only the ability to utilize Revit as a tool for so many facets, it was pretty incredible, but also to enhance, I'd say, even the firm's perspective on how to do co-working nationally. We ended up doing, I think, 370 projects of WeWork at the end of the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what do you think, in your opinion, I obviously WeWork is still a very viable business today. What do you think, in your opinion, happened along the way with them?
We talk about that on a serious note internally. We talk about that. there was a year where things changed. And I think we all can we pin it. 2017 is where it kind of switched up. It's where the core ethos of what WeWork was, encouraging culture and collaboration through shared work environments. It started pivoting to, we need to open spaces to accommodate seats. And it went from design and approach towards that into double your seat count this year.
Right.
Commodity, basically. Double. Yeah. And when you move that fast, things start to wane off. And, you have to answer to investors to do so. The business plan to accommodate the investors, projections was to open as many desks as possible. It's crazy.
Right. And then then all of a sudden there were stores, retail shops, and then there was
gym, store, We Live.
Yeah, it definitely went off the rails there.
Literally did. I worked in almost all those.
Listen, we had a few people at Mancini Duffy that, left to go work at WeWork, and it was like going to be the thing, right? And since then I always joke, whenever a company decides that they're going to have their own architecture department and do their own in-house architecture, any kind of big corporation, it's over. Time to run. Time to not invest anymore. Everyone thinks they can be an architect, and it falls apart on them.
I'm going to say this one thing about this, and if anyone listens into this that's from the WeWork alumni, the people there was probably the most intelligent and innovative group of individuals that ever collaborated on a mission that I've ever seen. Those alumni that have shifted on to other parts of their careers are doing really amazing things. Yeah. Some of the things that actually that pertain to our profession and technology. It was so overshadowed, unfortunately, by the position of one person, which I will not name, and unfortunately, I'd say a level of immaturity of how that person should project what WeWork was.
Right.
A lot of stuff was buried in there that never surfaced, which was amazing stuff that could have completely redefined how we practice on a day-to-day basis. So,
yeah, and even one of the guys that left here to go to WeWork is now at Tesla, which is awesome, and doing a great job there. So I agree. I was upset when we had lost those people to go to WeWork. I understood it for sure, and they were some of our best employees. So, but everyone moved on, which is great. And as I said, I think WeWork is a viable business still, and can thrive again for sure. So along the way, now you're working. You're obviously at Vocon, but you're working with the client of WeWork. You meet what are now your partners at Canoa. And at the start of the pandemic last year, you decided, hey, I'm leaving Vocon and I'm going to go and do this startup.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that decision.
The story.
And then let's talk about it. What do you do now and what is Canoa?
It's interesting. People ask me this question. And when I moved on from Vocon, a lot of people ping me and usually, ask me questions. There wasn't anything that's drama-filled or risque in the reason for departure. I will say this: it comes on a very personal note. It's not easy to be a principal of an organization at all. It's an extremely lonely position, and the aspects of how much you touch the practice of architecture, it wanes over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I loved my run at Vocon. It was amazing. I met some amazing people, but it did get to me. I wanted to basically experiencing something different where I had a greater impact on the built environment, and I could do so where actually I had my hand in it and develop it. And so the discussions about modular design and construction, the aspects of using technology as a facet to augment a professional and actually building those tools was really intriguing. And quite honestly, the people at Vocon knew this. In 2019, I was having those conversations. It's we need to push this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I wanted to do it with them, but it's extremely difficult. So it was tricky because even prior to the pandemic, as many know, some of our clients ran into a wall with a couple of scenarios, and it was getting really tricky. And towards the beginning of 2020, I was having one of those, you can call it a midlife crisis, you can call it whatever it was, but this epiphany, it's like, I really want to shift my energy and efforts into trying to redefine, for one, the way that architects practice, two, delve into technology, which I thought I knew. I didn't know anything about until now, and not even until now. There's so much to learn about technology. And three, actually practice sustainable means and methodologies and really push the barriers. Like, not be constrained by perspectives of pre-established budgets or the opinions of some political reason. And so at the time, Vocon, I wouldn't call it was stable at the time, because no one was stable during COVID, but there was a window there. And I had a very amicable and positive departure. I actually called up the owner and CEO of Vocon on a Monday morning, and she understood. It was very genuine. And I introduced every client to a person at Vocon for a transfer. And I still talk to all of them today. Yeah. And I talked to at least like half of the office of Vocon New York. So I moved on, and I left May 29th. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. The thing that weighed on me the most was leaving the people that joined up and we grew all the WeWork and Compass with.
Right.
I had a very emotional Instagram moment that I posted, which I don't do. And effectively, June 1st, I started as a partner at Canoa, and we've been doing what we do ever since. I want to leave a gap there if you have any questions, though. Yeah.
No. That's a great transition. I do want to understand, and for the audience too, exactly what you do.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this is there's a mission and a goal. But with any startup, you have to find your footing, right?
Yeah.
So the core mission of what we want to do is we want to build a sustainable, let me rephrase. We want to encourage the aspect of building sustainably across the United States, even globally. And to do so, we want to provide the tools and the abilities for any professional to do so in an effective manner, where they're educated about sustainable principles, modularity, frankly, transparency in the process. Now, that sounds like a lot of words, but the reality and the core goal, what we're doing, is to build a platform that is, frankly, a vertical stack model. That vertical stack model includes partners that kind of blend into it. But it propels a level of transparency in both the way you build things and the way you acquire things. So it meets a level of, frankly, openness for creating environments that are built for 30 years, are carbon neutral, can be constantly modular switch. Now, there's misperceptions that because we do technology, and yes, we do technology, we have automations in, frankly, layouts, engines, and program engines, and things of that nature. We're trying to supplant the profession in some fashion. And that's not the case at all.
Right. Technology
in itself is evolving at such an exponential rate, even before COVID. And it's basically rising. And sometimes it's rising and surpassing the architectural practice and going directly to clients. It is our goal and our right to help encourage that, facilitate that, and actually build upon those technologies to make our profession better too. And I seem to ramble right here, but the main goal is, at the end of the day, and we always say this internally, we want to build 100 million square feet of interior space, adaptively reused, not ground up, interior space that will truly last for 30 years at its core, but can constantly flex and move around on the interiors. That's what we want to do.
Okay.
How we get there, it's basically technology, education, partnerships, growth, most importantly, team. Team. And sometimes we're going to have to do it ourselves. Sometimes we'll help people do it. It's kind of the trajectory we're going for.
So give me an example of a project in this particular case that's done in this model.
Sure. So let's talk about ground floor activations. Mm-hmm. So retail space. We all know retail space is kind of a very interesting subject. Frankly, retail was kind of going by the wayside
already, yeah.
Even pre-COVID. For one, the understanding that the ground floor in itself, what we perceive as retail as a industry, needs to be completely changed. Retail is not just selling clothes. It's not. What the ground floor is, it creates the energy for pedestrian traffic to show up based on the premise, the amenities and the programs that they want at that time to then continually go to. Eventually, the occupation of the upper levels of the building that ground floor inhabits will start to fill out. Now, over the last 30 years, clothing stores and coffee shops and restaurants were those things. And those still might be the case.
Right. But
people need to listen and understand that the ground floor is more than that these days. The problem is that even pre-COVID, the thought is, well, we're just going to replace the clothing store with another clothing store. It doesn't need to be the case. So how do you do that in such a simple facet? Well, for one, are there means and methods to leave the infrastructure or the core of the retail space intact, meet code compliance and zoning code, but actually create modular systems inside the environment that can accommodate a library or an urban farm? Who knows what it is?
Right.
All those tools and facets, those things can be developed. It's just a matter of creating the programs to understand it. There is still a place for the architect to, frankly, design and construct, the engineer to develop infrastructures and actually testing methodologies, right. The interior designer to create the environments. But sometimes you need technologies to help make those things go faster.
So what are you guys providing in that example? Let's say it was a clothing store and it's 10,000 square feet or bigger, and you want to put a library in it or something else. What does Canoa...
Oh, now you're going to get into the risque stuff. So
what do you actually produce? Is it a product? Is it a...
It's a series of modules and products. So basically, and those things are always changing. Automation, super critical. So automation, potential development of programs. So numerical programs, budgetary programs, FF&E, how it correlates to the programs. Understand your budget before you even tap into stuff. It doesn't mean it's done. It means you understand as you go forward. Okay. Interpretations of zoning code and building code, they can happen. And we're not the only ones doing this, by the way. This is not like a new thing. For easy deciphering, it doesn't mean it's done. It means you understand, you're comfortable to move forward in. You still have to dive deep. Okay. Automated layouts, which is probably the most risque conversation we're going to have in this thing, can be done. And it can be done in such a way that you feel comfortable moving forward. Yeah. All that can be done literally within minutes instead of weeks from now. Yeah. And there are dozens of companies doing it at this moment.
Even Mancini Duffy. I mean, we're doing that in a bit, not at that scale, but we're trying to automate some portions of it. I know Gensler's also doing something like that. And when you really think about it, it's just iterations on a theme. And if you can get to that sort of end result faster, then you have more time to actually design.
That's right.
Which has been my whole thing here. We spend weeks and weeks going back and forth showing options, sometimes even showing options that we know don't work, just to show that we've shown options. There's really no point to that, And so if you can get to a consensus faster, but in your case, are you also providing budgets? Are you providing, how from the sustainability side, how is it sustainable?
Oh, that's where it gets super cool. Okay, so the answer is yes for the budgets. Again, high level. We call it high fidelity in terms of that. We are boiling down as we do pinpoint more detail on specific products. It gets greater in detail and more refined. But the cool thing about this is the thing that I don't want to just skip over is that of carbon neutrality, health and wellness, and how the materials that you actually have in that space are impacted within the environment. A lot of that data actually exists today, and there are companies that do that. They build upon whether you meet certain levels, your distance from manufacturing points, the assembly portions of what it is. The really important thing, and I would love to know if this is an answer here or not, you can select materials that are LEED compliant. But do you actually truly know, like, the carbon impact that you have done on your interior space at the end of the day?
No.
you could do it. You spend 2 weeks doing it, and I'm sure that the fee's not built in for that. Exactly. And so, wouldn't it be great and not contradictory or not computational to have a software tool that will help you understand that at like a very expedient time? Even honestly, if you have an automated layout, if you know you're over budget, like at the day one instead of VEing, 3 months down the line.
Yep.
Same thing with furniture. It's not like we're trying to like create like, oh, click and you're done. You don't need this person. No, you don't. It's not that. We're trying to help the system in the whole process. But the carbon aspect of this, the health and wellness, there are other people, within the world that are definitely tackling this. Some more than us. We're trying to do is bring it to that level and like really bring it up there through simple means, through platform basis, things of that.
That's great. So a couple other questions about the business itself. Did you guys raise money for this? Is it private equity? How have you started this process?
So we raised a seed round.
Okay.
3 wonderful investors, and we did it during COVID.
Right. Impressive.
It was. I didn't attend every single meeting. It was definitely driven by other partners at the company, but I would say that was probably, I know as they say, one of the most challenging experiences I've ever had. But it was great. So we raised our seed round. We closed December 31st of last year.
Congrats.
And as many companies do, in seed rounds, you kind of find your footing, you find your client, find your system in the first year you build, and then you go up to Series A. And that's where you really, really like push the boundaries and keep going. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay. And client-wise, you have clients under your belt?
We do have clients.
That's great.
Which is amazing also. I mean, having clients and actually having a seed round is amazing. The clients are very diverse. We have healthcare clients. We have coffee shop clients. We have clients that are in branding. Mm-hmm. It's really exciting. The kind of the core basis of even our client engagements really started in that premise of ease for understanding of spaces through automation and technology. Eventually, the sourcing of those products, I would say a good handful of them are coming from secondhand resources, which meaning they want secondhand inventory to actually install their stuff, which leans into this whole circular economy conversation, which we were very educated in, but we're not like diving into it literally today. We want to establish ourselves. If we were to bring over, and this is kind of the core premise, if we were to bring over secondhand furniture and quality product that is amazing, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
It meets the mission, so.
That's great. And so with that mission, one thing I noticed from the website is that you guys are a certified B Corp.
That's right.
Or pending certified B Corp. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually, people at Mancini know this, I'm obsessed with this idea of B Corp and making a service company a B Corp. Could we actually make Mancini a B Corp? And so my question is, what exactly is a B Corp? And what are the advantages for you?
A CEO would probably know better than me at this moment, and I don't want to sound miseducated at this, but frankly, a B Corp is a corporation, obviously, that continually needs to prove that it meet a certain number of standards that are based on the premise of how you interact within the company as well as what you actually provide outside of the company.
Right.
And you have to continually do that.
I know of a few, like Patagonia, I know is one. I know that Allbirds is one, mm-hmm. right? There's a few, and those are companies that I admire that, I'm very impressed that you guys are a B Corp.
Again, it's all about the mission and the goal of what we want to do.
So part of what we do here is take a critical look at how architects work with their clients. And as you and I have spoken about in the past, the process of how we deliver projects. I noticed from the Canoa website, this is in fact obviously one of your goals, and I put it in quotes here in my notes, sort of reinventing the practice and building a healthier built environment. Mm-hmm. I love the architecture profession. There are so many wonderful people, so many interesting, innovative, and smart folks. And we get access to people that most never even have an opportunity to meet in person. I have worked with Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, John Foley, founder of Peloton, and many more legends. There is another aspect of architects that fascinates me. How do clients view us? How do they work with us? Those that work with architects either have a wonderful experience or a pretty bad one. Let's continue to listen to the lessons they've learned. And now back to the episode. So let's talk specifically about architects and the industry that we're all in. In your opinion, what do you think architects do well, and what do you think they do wrong? And is the process broken in a sense?
The process is broken. End of statement. Let's get into it. I think there's a really interesting architecture in itself. It has fallen into consistency of what has been a 30-year-old traditional system of how the profession should be built. And over the 30 years, over and over again, it went from architects solely kind of controlling the system of how things are built, being involved into chair design and into even the engineering of what it is, and slowly parceling it away. And this is not new. You've heard this before, slowly parceling away. In terms where it kind of boiled into the practice itself has turned into this like commodity basis.
Yeah.
What we do well is, frankly, through the outside, we are kind of the stopgap to create, frankly, compliant, life-saving environments for people to occupy, like work, residential. It is our job to prevent disasters in the world, prevent buildings from falling over, prevent fires and people from not getting out in time, materials and methods, things of that structure. And we do that really well. It's our job. It's overshadowed by the consistency of being productized and commoditized for like the dollars and cents of choosing into this and this and this. At some point, like, we should really take a stand and go back into what we're supposed to do. Our job, our environment is failing right now. Like, we are sitting in New York City. I have read 1,099 ordinances over the last 8 months. New York City is far above and beyond the entire United States. We have a drastic problem with the environment and the way it's going to be built. And we have a very short time to do so. Our main goal is to design and build sustainably. We should not be tethered down by the bill rate or the fee or the structure, but we are, and we're stuck. I can't say it was like that 30 years ago. Maybe I could. None of us were there at that point.
Right.
We need to reemerge as that presence. And how we can do so is to actually combat that through the aspect of technology. You want to pay X number of dollars for a fit plan, or do you want to pay X number of dollars for me to construct a space that is above the bar of California code? Now, let me be honest. That client will be like, oh my God, I'm amazed. It costs $5 for this, but $3,000 for this. Okay, I'll do it. Like, that's super cool. But we're stuck in the consistent commodity of having to meet the baseline of the fit plan.
Yeah.
Over and over again, of the due diligence report, over and over and over again.
Yep.
And like, oh, that's built into the budget. Offset it, shift those dollars and cents, use the technology because we can do it today to do so. Again, I'm rambling at this point, but
no, I think it's valid. And I think about it. You think COVID has actually helped this scenario in a sense?
Okay, this is an interesting subject. I think I'm going to say no. And you're going to say why? Because we're sitting in a major city at this moment, right? We're sitting in a major city where we're pushing the envelope and the boundaries. In the rest of the nation, I can very, very confidently say they're probably not thinking the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. We want to enhance the wellness of buildings and structures. I will tell you, in states today, people are still following energy code that use incandescent light bulb calculations to calculate energy code.
Right.
Can you even buy an incandescent light bulb calculation anymore? I don't even know if you can get that anymore.
Right.
And that still exists. And so we need to, and I know it's a step-by-step stuff, but we really need to like escalate and push these baseline standards across the board. COVID propelled how we design the 15-minute walk and how we do so in major cities, the interior environments. That needs to be pushed out extremely quickly to the rest of the nation extremely quickly.
Yeah, I could see that. So a few more questions about just architects in general. Do you think architects and designers understand cost and budget and schedules? And is that something that technology can help with as well?
Okay, well, the answer would be technology can absolutely help with the understanding of costs. We're afraid the constant variations of costs as it applies to design and those variables, 100%. Actually, technology can calculate labor rates across the United States and tell you how much it costs in New York versus it costs in Arkansas. You can do all those things. You can design more effectively, check in more effectively, not wait 2 weeks to get things priced out. Actually do so on a level of confidence. It exists. I would say that, do architects understand budget? Let's think about this one. Architects actually told budgets a lot of times too. I mean, one of the questions that I've always asked back in the day is like, "What's the budget?" And they go, and most people that are RFP, and they go, "It's like a midline budget." And they go, "Okay, what does that mean?" I don't understand what that means. Right. So, are you going to tell me the budget at some point if you get the job? Okay. Do I know if I want to do this project yet? If I don't know what the budget is.
Exactly.
I think if architects actually had the tools and the resources, they can understand it much better.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. So at Canoa, you guys are partnering with architects and engineers. How are you selecting these companies?
That's actually a really good one. So one of the things that we're doing in both facets is we want to, and we're less than a year old. We're celebrating our 1 year June 1st. Is to partner with companies and basically professional services that are aligned with our theory. It's not necessarily we want the cheapest individual at that basis, but to ask an architect, hey, we want your help in designing a canvas space where you don't have to actually redesign the structure of CDs for the next 30 years is kind of like, what? I'm sorry. No, hold on. And the same thing with the engineers. It's like, hey guys, I want you to design a structure in a space that is basically built to last. And I can't tell you the program because I don't know what it's going to be. And they go, huh? But I mean, it's kind of the interesting thing about it is, wasn't our goal in practice like to create timeless design such a long time ago?
Yeah, it absolutely was.
Like, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, but the common lease nowadays is 3 to 5 years. Like, people are just jetting their spaces and gutting those spaces every single time. It's not timeless anymore.
Yeah.
So shouldn't we recreate the timeless experience again?
Yeah, and you look at some of the revitalization of like the TWA terminal, right? And you look at, I was down in Florida in Miami, and we went to the Fontainebleau for something, and they restored all of that. And timeless design sells, it really does. And if you just paid a little bit of attention to it as you're doing it, and rather being caught up in the budget by 50 cents cheaper here and there, you do end up with something that is sustainable, good for the environment, and even better designed along the way. I totally agree. So kind of bringing it all back around, if you had to do it differently as far as your career, what might you have changed along the way?
Interesting. I don't really know if I would change. I don't know if I would change my trajectory and goal. I think for me, taking the things I'd learned, would I probably encourage the ways and means to practice an architecture firm differently? I probably would. Would it be kind of welcomed addition, or would it be considered kind of a kooky, different type of company? Probably would. But I think that there are means and methods from what I'm learning right now, specifically in the approach of how SaaS companies work. Mm-hmm. Software and things of that nature, which are extremely relevant to financial and operational, even performance-based systems that architectural practices can definitely use to supplant, I'm sorry to say, the traditional bill rate per hour methodology. And they can do so relatively quickly. It requires some tweaks, but in the end, I think it would provide a more efficient, more transparent, an effective model for tracking those things.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Great way to leave it. So I'm I'm looking forward to seeing, Canoa grow and change the industry. I'll be watching all the way.
We'll be watching you too.
So thank you so much for being here as my guest on the Anti-Architect podcast. I really enjoyed kind of hearing your story and obviously what you're doing now and how you're really trying to change the industry. To see and read more about Canoa, you can visit their website at www.canoa.supply. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.